In 1854, Lincoln wrote, "The legitimate object of government is to do for a community of people whatever they need to have done, but cannot do it all or cannot do so well for themselves in their separate and individual capacities. In all that the people can individually do as well for themselves, government ought not to interfere." By 1854, the National Whig Party was weak and fragmented. The longtime party leader, Henry Clay, died in 1852. Lincoln eulogized him, and the Democratic Party had championed the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854, ushering in the controversy of popular sovereignty and overturning the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which Clay was the mastermind. The longtime platform of the Whig Party focused around government-sponsored internal improvements, economic tariff reform, the modernization of society, and the general unification of society. Lincoln was firmly a member of the Whig Party since his first attempt at politics in 1832, in which he actually was arguing for the use of federally funded internal improvements in Sangamon County, Illinois. Fast forward to 1856, and Lincoln received 110 votes for vice president at the Republican convention, proving that he had become an active and recognized member of the new Republican Party. Abraham Lincoln's conversion to the Republican Party was due to his belief that the traditional Whig platform was still beneficial for America and that slavery and popular sovereignty were articles that needed to be ended by the federal government, because he believed that national unity and personal freedom for the American people was of the utmost importance. In 1854, Lincoln wrote his Fragments on Government, and he also wrote some fragments on slavery. They were not published during his life, however, they provide insight into his personal and political thoughts, views that would help shape the future of the United States of America. Abraham Lincoln believed in individual freedom for all men. Accordingly, he saw the practice of popular sovereignty as a perpetuation of slavery, an illogical wrong that would eventually be extinguished. As proof, he stated in his Fragments on Slavery, "If A can prove, however conclusively, that he may of right enslave B, why may not B snatch the same argument and prove equally that he may enslave A?" Lincoln viewed the extinguishing of slavery as something that was good for the community of the American people, but was not something that they could do without the help of the intervention of the federal government. However, Lincoln was cautious to associate himself with abolitionists. He didn't want that to be the only cause for which he was known. Henry Clay and him had different ideas about the practical ending of slavery. Because Henry Clay was a slave owner himself, he believed in gradualism. He believed that over time the government could step in and remove slavery instead of in one fell swoop probably causing chaos in the South, which would have been true. At Henry Clay's funeral, Lincoln said about Henry Clay, he said, "As a politician or statesman, no one was so habitually careful to avoid all sectional ground. Whatever he did for the whole country. Mr. Clay's predominant sentiment from first to last was a deep devotion to the cause of human liberty, a strong sympathy with the oppressed everywhere, and an ardent wish for their elevation." Now this is ironic because Henry Clay was a slave owner. Some of Henry Clay's opponents picked that point out as well. Lincoln was a proponent of freedom, and he thought that a free society provided people with an opportunity to pursue self-development. Furthermore, in a letter to his longtime friend Joshua Speed in 1855, Lincoln stated that he hated to see runaway slaves hunted down and sent back to the South. And then going back to his eulogy of Clay, he said again, "If as the friends of colonization hope, the present and coming generations of our countrymen shall by any means succeed in freeing our land from the dangerous presence of slavery, and at the same time in restoring a captive people to their long-lost fatherland with bright prospects for the future, and this too so gradually that neither races nor individuals shall have suffered by the change, it will indeed be a glorious consummation." Now, although Lincoln never took any legal action against slavery until he was after president, he was still very careful to attach himself to the abolitionist cause. His allegiance to the Republican Party was inevitable when in 1854 he again attacked the practice of popular sovereignty in the western states. In his speech at Peoria in 1854, Lincoln supported the Founding Fathers' mandate to outlaw slavery in new territories. As stated in the Northwest Territory in 1787, slavery was only allowed to exist where it already had been. This was in the 1850s. This was a clear position against the emerging northern and southern factions of the Democratic Party. Now Lincoln had a choice. He could align himself with the Free Soil movement, essentially an anti-slave political stance. He could align himself with the Know-Nothings, an anti-immigration political party, or the Republicans. Logically, maybe hindsight is 20/20 here, but logically it seemed that the Republicans were much more well-rounded, well-adjusted political party with a brighter future than single platform parties like the Know-Nothings or the Free Soilers. So this leaves the question, what did Lincoln really believe about the role of government? He seems that he personally believed that abolitionism was moral. However, he seemed reluctant to take a political abolitionist stance. He does later on when he's president. But before he's president, it seems like he might have a lot to lose if that political position blows up in his face. If we go back to his writings on government, his fragments on government, we see what else he thought about government. And he states here that the government has two proper roles. The first, in relation to wrongs, embraces all crimes, misdemeanors, and non-performances of contracts. The other embraces all which, in its nature and without wrong, requires combined action, as public roads and highways, public schools, charities, pauperism, orphanages, estates of the deceased, and the machinery of the government itself. He elaborated on the second point here by listing different internal improvements, the roads, schools, orphanages, etc. This is proof that he was still holding fast to his old Whig beliefs. He still supported Henry Clay's American system that was proposed decades earlier. Lincoln here is an unyielding admirer of Henry Clay, and in fact, Clay's greatest political adversary was, in his time, the Democrat Andrew Jackson. Now, President Jackson claimed to represent the common man. However, his policies of lowering tariffs, closing the National Bank, it helped jumpstart the Whig Party in 1833, and that was led by Henry Clay. Jackson's opposition to Clay's proposed American system and the internal improvements and his nationalistic attitude inspired Stephen Douglas to idolize Jackson in a similar way that Lincoln idolized Clay. These positions made Douglas and Lincoln natural political enemies who clashed over the issue of popular sovereignty and the proper role of government, including the role of the federal government in controlling the spread of slavery. As the Whig Party steadily declined, it was logical that Lincoln would become a Republican and not a Democrat, based on his old alliances. In the state and congressional elections in 1854 and 1855, traditional Whig voters now had a choice to vote with the Know-Nothings, the Free Soilers, or the Republicans. For politicians like Lincoln, who recognized that slavery was becoming the most important political issue in the country, joining the Republicans while retaining old Whig motivations was easy for him. After all, Henry Clay was well loved by many Americans. In the last statement of his Fragments on Government, Lincoln said, "From this it appears that if all men were just, there still would be some, though not so much need for government." In this line of thinking, it's safe to assume that Lincoln saw the government as a moral agent, and he denounced governmental actions that he deemed immoral. Just like he saw the secession of the southern states from the Union in 1860, that was immoral. About those secessions, he said, "Plainly, the central idea of secession is the essence of anarchy. A majority held in restraint by the constitutional checks and limitations, and always changing easily with deliberate changes of popular opinions and sentiments, is the only true sovereign of a free people. Whoever rejects it does of necessity fly to anarchy or to despotism. Unanimity is impossible. The rule of a minority as a permanent arrangement is wholly inadmissible, so that rejecting the majority principle, anarchy or despotism in some form is all that is left. In the election of 1860, the Republican Party was only regional. Then in 1864, right before Lincoln's second election, his re-election as president, Lincoln injected the Republican Party with a dose of Whiggism by constructing the Republicans as a national union party. This worked in 1864 because the voters who re-elected Lincoln were expecting him to defeat the rebellion that was in the South, reunify the country, and national unity had always been a mainstay of the Whig platform. Abraham Lincoln was able to rebrand himself as a Republican late in his political life, while he remained true to his long-time held Whig philosophies. What's interesting here is, what if Lincoln hadn't died? I think it's safe to assume that he would have continued to remain true to his long-time held Whig tendencies of believing that the government can provide a meaningful, tangible help to communities. But I think also he would have pushed civil rights even further. He would have used his republicanism, his evolution from Whig to being a Republican. He would have used that republicanism to encourage the rights, to ensure that the rights of free blacks were upheld. Clearly, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment still would have passed, and blacks might have been better off if Lincoln hadn't been shot in 1865.